all set, everyone?
Yep.
Call the meeting of the Board of Appeals. That seems different, to order. And I think a roll call, same as it was before. You want to take that again for this meeting? I suppose we should.
Yep.
Okay, Pat.
Here.
Trevor is absent. Bruce.
Here.
Corey.
Here.
And I'm here, okay. I'm not too sure that we all agreed that we would do this, so we're gonna have a little dissertation here from our attorney. Can you tell us how we got to this point?
Absolutely, and I thank you so much for being here this morning. At a prior meeting, not of this body, but of the Board of Adjustment, the topic was brought before you of the issue of the Building Board of Appeals. That technically under City Code, we have a, and I'm looking to our code official to jump in and correct me if at any time I misstate things, but we have set up a structure that provides it for a Building Board of Appeals that allows for individuals who disagree with enforcement measures that have been taken by the code official to appeal to that body. And so these would be instances in which the individuals did not receive a municipal citation, so they did not go through municipal court. Rather, there was a violation noted, but the building department abated and then assessed a, I don't know if you could say a fine, but assessed a cost to that abatement. And so this would be the venue for their recourse. At the last, at that discussion, it was asked whether members of the Board of Adjustment would be willing to also serve as members of the Building Board of Appeals, or the alternative would have been to amend the jurisdiction of the Board of Adjustment to allow for building appeals to come before you. So it was, the discussion focused on, would you like to expand the jurisdiction of the Board of Adjustment, or did it make sense to just find individuals to fill the Board of Appeals? And as my recollection of the discussion, and again, I would I'll defer to our building official as well to comment on that, is that the Board of Adjustment members felt that it made sense to keep the boards separate, that given that the Building Board of Appeals hadn't been called upon for more than a decade, I believe it was, that it probably wasn't something that was going to come up very often, and that it that instead of changing the jurisdiction of the Board of Adjustment, which could be confusing for folks because there would be different standards of review, the way you look at cases and the types of matters coming before you, that that there would be a preference to serve. And so there was a question about whether members would be willing to serve, and I think I think a comment that was made immediately prior to convening this meeting is rather apt, which is there was not a strong no. So, and as a result, this meeting was scheduled. And the reason why there was a need to bring, to schedule a meeting of the Building Board of Appeals was that after last summer's mowing abatements occurred, there was a cost assessed, notices went out, and if that cost was not paid by a certain time, then it went on the property tax rolls as of January. After January, the city received complaints or inquiries or concerns from 3 property owners who who had experienced the mowing and then the assessment of the mowing charges onto the property tax rolls. And there were various reasons for the concerns that were being expressed. And I don't want to speak for the parties about what those are, because they have their own voice. But in discussing how to respond to these concerns, it was decided within city administration that it would be appropriate to give these individuals a venue for them to be able to come forward and express what those concerns are and ask for some sort of remedy if the within the appropriate channels, if a remedy could be given. So we wanted to give them that opportunity to come forward and have a voice. And the Building Board of Appeals is the appropriate venue in the building code for them to give that voice. The issue that you may have noticed or run into is included in the packet are various excerpts from the International Building Code, which is adopted in the city code as being applicable. And one of the provisions in that code says that the Building Board of Appeals should convene within 20 days of the appeal request, and that 20 days sort of starts to run from the notice of when the violation occurred. Well, the complaints came in early winter, January, February of this year, but the notice about those complaints actually went out in September, August, September, I believe. So well past the 20 days. However, notice or receiving the letter was an issue for some people. And so that was why I always felt that, yes, this is well past that 20 days. However, we still thought, from an administration point of view, that it would be appropriate to still give the venue or the platform for the voice, for them to express their concerns, given that notice was one of the issues some people were concerned with. And so given that the Board of Appeals has not convened for more than a decade, it has no rules of procedure, there is not clear guidance for you about how to handle these matters. That is actually something that the code says you can adopt on your own, deciding how to proceed in the appropriate order. I would, in discussing with Mr. Schmidt, suggest that, and I can let him speak to his preference, but we spoke briefly before the meeting, and given that this would be the first meeting in a very long time, that there are no set procedures, his thought was that it would be appropriate for the individuals who have expressed these concerns to be given an opportunity to come up, say what their concerns are, allow you to ask questions, allow Mr. Schmidt to respond to any questions, or provide any additional information that you feel that you need to address the concerns. And thereafter, you also have some options. Under the code, you can set your procedures, so you can say that your decision is final. If you say that your decision is final, then it can be appealed to district court. You could also say that your decision is recommended, and that if somebody is displeased by your decision, they could appeal it to the city commission. So those are the two, I think, options you have, is letting an individual know that if you will either provide them or agree with them and give them the remedy they're requesting, in which case I believe any return or anything affecting the tax records would appropriately go before the city commission to see if it would be a recommended finding to see if they concur, and likewise it would be appropriate that if you believe that the charges should stand, that individual also have the opportunity to go before the city commission and contest that at that level. So that sums up what my thought is and how we got here, but I'd be happy to answer any questions or defer to Mr. Schmidt.
One additional item with this, this is new to come in for property maintenance item. The Board of Appeals also, just so everyone knows that it's mostly in the past it's building related. If you have alternative building material that based on the building official's opinion doesn't meet the code, they could come in front of you to present the case, and you'd make a decision on that. So just wanted to include that with the property maintenance. It includes all I codes, property maintenance, mechanical, plumbing, and the building code, residential and commercial.
Okay. What is the board's decision?
Yes.
Pat?
Yes.
Yes. Trevor? Yes. Okay. Okay, very good. I see this was, signed by Sydney Campbell,
Well, that's, we,
but,
That's our, we have seasonal help in the summertime that is part-time, and a majority of the letters go out by our summer staff, but they're overseen by our code enforcement staff also.
are these letters registered or?
The code allows us, in the past, we used to send out registered mail, but based on the cost of that and the numbers that we send out over 1,000 letters every summer. The cost to do a registered letter, we backed off on that, and the code allows us to do first class. We can actually post it on site and in person. So the city, our policy is to first class mail, unless generally, if we have reoccurring, which some of these are, we will send the registered. If we have a owner that is stating that they don't get the mail, then we will send it that way, certified.
Is this 20 day from the time of mailing or the time they get the?
20 days from the time of mailing of the notice of the violation, which occurs prior to the property being mowed. Am I hearing correct?
Correct.
So there could be a little discrepancy on time.
Well, if a property owner is out of state, we generally add time to it. What we like to do is if it's a reoccurring property, I mean, it's generally a week, 5 business days is kind of that lake town. In town here, I guess we're kind of getting into it. I mean, our laws and everything is on the book, and we have our seasons here in North Dakota. In the winter, you have to snow. In the summer, you have to mow. And we feel that 5 business days, in order to keep things moving with 1,000+ letters, that we just can't push it out longer than that.
Okay.
Because by the time we do abate, some of these properties are chest high.
Have you ever charged a customer or a citizen of the city of Dickinson that has property for snow removal?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe the engineering department sends out notices, and I believe in the past there has some, I'm not sure.
Would that be included in this package as well?
The snowing? Those citations are not included in the summary that was provided to you.
But as far as the board, is that what your question
Yeah.
is? Would the board hear those also?
That's an interesting question. I haven't looked at that. Who does the enforcement? If I can turn to our city engineer regarding enforcement of the snow removal.
Good morning, City Engineer Craig Kubis. Our engineering staff does send out those letters, and then it goes to buildings and sites on the, I'll call it the action end of the snow removal. I think very few properties are shoveled by or snow removed by city staff. I can't speak for the history on it entirely, but many times we go out and it's city actions that have the people in violation, whether it's snow that gets piled up on sidewalks. So sometimes our public works staff even has to come out with heavier equipment to move that snow. So it's really a subjective thing. It's not lawn to be mowed. Sometimes, and if you all live in town, the snow can get piled up in those bigger storms. So we tread lightly on the snow removal end of things, I would say. But we do have a separate section of code that refers to sidewalk maintenance. So there's some differences between the property maintenance and sidewalk maintenance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay. First on the list, J.B. Big.
One comment,
Yes, go ahead.
Leonard, I noticed that 2 of these, it looks like they have 10 days notice and one was 7 days notice maybe. The one for Steyer was 7 days. Went out on the 26th of June and due by July 7th. The rest of them looks like they had 10 days. So that's within the.
Correct.
The limit.
What I ask is that they give that, generally it's a week, minimum of a week, is kind of what our policy has been.
Because it started out in May, 2 of them were in May and they were 10 days, and then in June, it went to 7 days. So after, if they don't meet this deadline, July 7th, or May 26th and 25th, how soon after these days is the city mowing?
Well, it depends on the contractor. Our contractor has actually talked to some of the people and tells them he's coming to mow. And some people take care of it.
Okay.
Because he doesn't, again, it's a private contractor. He doesn't want to be in the middle of something where a property owner, a frustrated property owner finds him on their lot mowing. So he does everything that he can to get it done before he even gets there. So it could be a day, it could be depending on, again, staff, if they're here, that 10 days could have been, well, our staff wasn't going to be there to check on it when they came back. So they put the extra days in there so that they're responsible for that task. So they generally, so it doesn't show as past due.
So the bill, the abatement charge, then how is that identified? Is that from the contractor? He's tracking what he mows, and then he reports that to the city?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
all right. So they're given more than one chance to take care of it. They're given the chance by the notice from the city and the second chance by the contractor.
If the
in most
contract,
cases.
in most cases, if the contractor makes contact with them.
Okay.
Okay, other questions? Comments?
Our compensation for this, let's discuss that after the meeting.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, so I believe you would be you would receive the same rate of pay as your, it's a separate meeting and you're being a separate board member. So it's the same rate as pay as, if you're referring to rate of pay as your, the one that you receive for being on the Board of Adjustment, yeah. If I can get my words out this morning.
Okay.
If you agree.
You said yes already.
Said yes. Okay. Okay, who's first on the list here then to KV Mayor Properties? Is anyone here to speak for them? I guess we continue to find.
If I, just for the record, we did, if I could ask Brandy to speak to the efforts that were made to provide them notice of this meeting.
So if they don't come to speak for themselves, then do we listen to arguments or comments that they provided on the phone, or do we just?
Did they provide arguments or comments to board members?
No, to the city.
I don't feel it would be appropriate for city representatives to provide comments. They could also have sent something in writing, and I don't believe we have received anything in writing.
What is the board's?
What,
No, go ahead.
what is their hardship? I mean, what are they stating? How come it's not maintained, or?
I guess I have not talked with KV Meyer Properties. Generally, my staff talks to them. I guess the normal is, well, we charge for mowing. I mean,
Right, but what
and-
is their hardship? Why couldn't they get there is kind of what I was hoping that we would have a legitimate
Yeah.
argument of why it wasn't done, and
And to talk about that, we've had properties where we've had owners park a mower right in the middle of the property, and we've gone in and mowed, and their argument was, well, they were getting ready to mow. I mean, we set our procedure, we set our deadlines. I mean, with good intentions, we have to move forward, and like I said, we send out so many notices that each individual one, I mean, obviously we've had circumstances where a personal event in somebody's life took place, and obviously we're going to work with people.
Right,
if
and
that
that's what I was
happens.
asking, if there was a hardship on that line.
Not that I'm aware of on this, no.
Okay. What is the decision of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I would indicate that, given the information on this individual account, that they have not represented themselves, they have not given us any indication that there is a problem. Therefore, I would imply this particular fine in the direction that it's going.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Corey. Further discussion?
I'd like to make one comment.
Yes.
We need to refer to these as fees. This is actually not a fine. Just, I know it's hard, I catch myself doing it also, but this is a fee on the city's fee schedule that we apply. It's actually not a fine where a citation is given.
They were not assessed any amount over and above the charge for the mowing services.
So in the packet that was sent to us, it talks about a misdemeanor. That doesn't apply in this case, and this is not a misdemeanor, this is just a fee, or?
They were not, and again, I'm going to look to Mr. Schmidt to correct me if I'm wrong. In order for there to have been a misdemeanor, they would have had to been cited under the municipal code, sent a citation, and would have had a separate fee. The $500 relates to the charge for mowing. So they were not cited as a violation under the municipal code. The building department went in and abated the nuisance, and the cost of that abatement was the $500 for the fee schedule, and that's what was put onto their property tax rolls. So they received no citation.
So what would become a misdemeanor? Why would they, give us an example of what would be a citation then?
If we had, if we had a very robust enforcement program, and I'm not saying it's not, but if we had a very, what could happen is building officials could, upon seeing the violations, refer the violations to, in coordination with the police department for municipal citations, which would be issued and then prosecuted by the city prosecutor in municipal court. And so those and still the property could still be abated and the charge is assessed for the abatement. So in addition to the 500 abatement charge, they would have had to also go through the process in municipal court and potentially be assessed fines above and beyond the zero fines that they were assessed. They would have had to pay more, and then they would have had a conviction for this on their record to the individual.
And based on the offense of mowing, we'd rather keep it here instead of going the other route. We do have cases that we have to go that way. I mean, if essentially if the city gets non-compliance, that's the route we go.
Good? Satisfied with?
I suppose if they don't let someone on their property, that would then fall into a civil action.
The misdemeanor represent, the city has multiple enforcement options that they can pursue, and I believe the mowing, I mean, on the spectrum of them, if you're looking at pursuing a misdemeanor charge on the one end to abating and assessing a cost of that abatement on the other, that the abating and assessing the cost is the least intrusive to the individual.
Any other comments, questions? If not, Pat,
Aye.
Corey,
Aye.
Bruce,
Aye.
and I'll vote aye. Okay, so, to follow up with that, then you people send the letter out and assess the fine?
In this particular instance, the charge had already been assessed and on the property tax, and it's put on the property tax roll, so it just affirms the prior action.
So then we would make a motion that that's the final decision then? Is
Yes.
that what the motion should read?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that was what Corey's
Pat.
decision.
Okay.
Or the appeal is denied would be another way to
Okay.
phrase it.
Okay, Robert and Holly Steyer. Good morning.
Good morning. I'm Holly Steyer. I am finishing up for my husband because he cannot be here today. He's the one that actually called, and I will take care of the rest since this is busy time. We were sent a letter. Unfortunately, it was sent to our old address. So we had no idea about any of this at all. I know when we mow our lot, we moved out of town. When we mow our lot there, we come into town and mow that back lot. I know there's a couple times I drove by, and I know the weeds were high, but the grass was low. But my main concern is, when I moved, I changed this address with the city so they could send me my last bill with the city. So I don't know why this was not changed. We did get our tax statement, which that's how we caught it. That came to our new address. So I don't know why these letters did not come to our new address. That's our concern. I guess my husband also called on April 19th of this year and changed it with the city assessor. He called a week later to talk to somebody about the bill, and it still wasn't changed. So I guess my concern is why it wasn't sent to us. And like I said, I drove by and I know the weeds were a little higher, but the grass was pretty low because it was a dry season.
Questions? Did the city get the return letter?
No. This, again, we send out, based on our records and our system. For the record, we were talking with IT to notify when somebody actually does a change of address, that it updates everything. When going back in there, it does bring up her new address to date. So whatever that process has been done. We did not receive any return letters on any of these. We do get some return letters, or if somebody just, whether they refuse the mail or what have you. But to date, we have not received any return mail.
It's been 3 years since we moved, so that's probably why.
Years?
Yes, 3 years since we moved, tomorrow actually.
Okay.
And you have not been notified of this?
No. Nope, I did get the letter about the meeting today, so I know it has been changed. But no, when I moved, I called the city, told them we were moving, and gave them our new address. So I don't know why that was not changed.
How come it went so long without being cut? I mean, if the grass, weeds are a foot high or more than 10 inches, I understand that's when it's sent.
Yes. On this particular project, the pictures speak volumes. And generally, we're not driving around looking for these. We're getting
Complaints?
complaints from neighbors. There, as
I'm
you can
glad-
see from the photo, that there's a lot of properties in this area. And again, we always give another week to abate the issue. And during that week's time, we continue to get those calls.
I guess I'm glad you brought that up because there's 2 lots that are north of ours that have, I bet you 5 abandoned vehicles and an old milk truck that has been sitting there for 3 years. I guess I don't understand how supposedly my grass is so tall, but you have abandoned vehicles. I guess I don't understand that.
Again, this ordinance is for the mowing. If there are abandoned vehicles, again, based on staff, a lot of, trying not to make any excuses, it's complaint driven. If a neighbor complains that there's a lot of abandoned vehicles, the process that we go through, we're send out the letters. Our letters go off to the PD. PD goes and tags the vehicles, and then it becomes another department's issue. I would have to know the addresses, and I'd be probably surprised that a letter hasn't gone out for that. But again, depending on the time of the year, whether there's snow, whether the towing company, we use one here in town, will go and take the vehicles based on space in a yard. I mean, I've been here for 16 years, and I mean, it does get frustrating with abandoned vehicles or unlicensed inoperable vehicles. That's one of our, I guess it's frustrating, where we send the letter, we get the calls. I mean, it's a process, and it seems to take probably longer than it should, but it's, again, staff-driven.
And it's easier to mow.
Well,
Pretty much.
again, the city used to mow, and this used to be way out of control because it would be city staff mowing these properties. 3 years back is where I believe it's 3 years back, where I went to the commission and asked if we could contract out because we weren't getting it done. We were inundated with calls and unhappy citizens. And we started the process, and that's when the fee for this went from $50, I think it was as low as $50 at one time, to the $500. And that's the #1 complaint now. Well, we don't want to do this. I mean, we have other things in our code that we need to put our attention to. But the $500 was to deter it from happening. If you have property and you need to maintain it.
Is it, I have a question. So let's say that we have he says, she says situation where, the letter went out, but they didn't get it. Is there a compromise that we can come to? If this is a first-time offense and, it's not a chronic thing, maybe it is, but if it isn't a chronic thing, can we give some relief to a $500 fine, or what are we allowed to do?
So there's sort of 2 issues I can appreciate the board would be grappling with is one, was there a violation of the code? And the second is, was there notice of the violation of the code? And if there wasn't effective notice of the violation of the code, and this were a citation, for example, in municipal court, I can see the citation being reduced or dismissed. The abatement of the property, I would just offer goes to and I don't want to advise you on a course of action, but the cost of the abatement goes to the cost that the city incurred for mowing the property. So if you were to come back and, I believe you could come back, and it's within your discretion to come back and say, you were assessed this, but you didn't get notice of it, So we think something else is fair. But the result would be that the city would essentially have to
Eat.
eat the cost of that, because the cost was incurred to perform the service,
They still paid the contractor $500. But
or whatever the contractor fee. So those would be the consideration. Now I say, I mean, so I think you have the discretion. What, how, given the length of time, it's complicated slightly by the fact that it's already on the property tax rolls, but I'm not going to say that it's impossible to adjust that, because there are methods to do that.
There are other municipalities that essentially do not send out notices. It's in the newspaper. Our ordinances are on the books, but we choose to actually send out these notices. I believe one of the things that we might look to in the future is actually putting a notice in the paper. However, we still, to be good stewards with the citizens, is to try to send out those notices, because the other property owners are definitely affected. And at times, I think we don't get there soon enough.
Are there any other questions? I'm setting in for Mr. Barr, who had to leave. Any other questions from the board?
I've got one more question. So you sent out 1,000 letters last year? Is that what you said?
Roughly, yes.
Okay. Out of the 1,000 letters, how many actually, do you have a number, how many were actually charged the?
Well, I would say the prior year we sent, it was over, I have a dollar amount, I believe it was over $68,000 in fees that were sent out.
Okay.
So it's pretty substantial.
What are the wishes of the board here this morning on this individual, Robert and Holly Steyer property violation?
I wish there was proof that there was nothing, that it was wrong address. I'm not.
I have it right here.
Do you? Okay.
Yeah.
Could you bring
I have
that?
all 3 letters that were sent.
Because I'm just afraid that every time someone says, I didn't get it, and we wouldn't.
It was sent to a previous address.
Yeah, we have these, but what is your current address? I can just see this being a common, it's the same as the common hardship is they didn't get it. And that's just take their word and.
Well, I guess my last City of Dickinson bill was sent to me.
Yeah,
Paid it.
I was concerned, because we're gonna see a lot of these, I'm guessing. And if they keep saying it wasn't sent, and,
Depends if they catch it on their real estate, because it doesn't even say what it was for, the $500. We had to call and find out.
yeah.
So if people just assume that it's just a assessment, they'll just go with it, but we didn't.
Has this property been notified prior? Is this the first offense? or-
Actually, I'm seeing 2 here. Was there just one?
One
Okay, so I'm not,
is the letter that we received is the only letter we have ever received in 3 years.
okay. After we send out the notices, also the administrative sends out the actual bill. So, and with talking with administrative staff, that mail did not come back either. So, again, we've sent out 2 notices. Neither one came back. We use our system, which whether it's updated currently or it will be updated more current today. But again, we used our information to what's readily accessible to us. The code does state that every reasonable means for information to send those notices out. We sent the notices out based on what we had on our files. There was a violation, it's clear by the photos, and the property was abated, and we paid a contractor. The process did happen. Unfortunately, it wasn't sent to the most current address.
Yeah, they weren't notified probably, and they were attempted to be notified, but if they didn't get it,
And the code actually, if we generally make a good faith attempt to notify a property owner, we've met the intent of the code.
okay.
Corey, do you have a form of a motion on this, or?
Just more informational gathering right now.
Okay. I think that at this time, we're going to table this one for a little bit more discussion between us here. And we'll get back to you on that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You just have my other sheet.
Where did her sheets go? Right there.
Our next item is Luke and Audrey Zenz. Is there anyone here to support that? Tell us about yourself. And
Yes, sir. My name is Luke Lenz, and the reason I'm here for the Board of Appeals, we do have a small lawn at a rental property of ours. It is about maybe a third of this room. The reason I felt necessary to come and dispute this was because of the $500 fee. I call it a fee because, or I almost call it I see it as a fine because of the cost. I used to say it was a fee if someone averages one lawn a month, a day for 4 months out of the summer, they're making $70,000. If they made every 1,000 letters, you guys would walk, or this contractor would make it out with $500,000 in services rendered, which is seems really high to me. So because of that, I think that I needed to discuss this with you. So thank you for hearing me today. Well, our complaint is very similar to Ms. Steyer, where our letter was sent also to an old address after we've been at our new address for over 2 years. We have received our 4 tax statements from our 4 properties at our new address the last 2 years prior. We also received them this year. We had not, we weren't aware of it until we saw our tax statement as well. And we had this assessment that we called on and found out it was for a lawn mowing. Now, I do understand that, so my request would be that this be reconsidered, and I believe it should be reduced at a minimum. I understand there's a cost to the city. I don't agree with that cost, but I think because we were not notified properly, it should be reduced. That's what I'm requesting.
are there any other questions from the board members?
This property I'm a little more familiar with because I drive by it every day. And, this isn't what am I on? So what I'm seeing here isn't, this looks, this property usually looks like this. The sidewalk is always full of weeds, so I'm assuming that this is a property that gets letters every year.
I'm not aware of, I guess, the frequency of letters. I believe there's been, let's see here. Yeah, I don't have any as far as more than one. This is just last year's.
So I'm not one to drive around and judge properties, but this one, I mean, this one just stands out every time you drive by it. It's right on the main drive, and it's out, usually looks like this, so, you know, just my observation.
Thank you. I have a question for you.
Yes, sir.
You're a resident of Dickinson. We're proud of our city. The one thing that really bothers me about this is, why aren't you taking care of this property if you own it?
These properties, it's written in the contract with my renters that they will maintain that property.
Because it's, I think it's something, if you own a piece of property, you need to take care of it. And I don't know, me and just you, I think the other lady, the same. I mean, if it's your property, shouldn't you mow it? Shouldn't you take care of it?
Then again, I agree that it was tall and it was mowed. My complaint is that I was not properly notified.
Okay. Well, I think, in all honesty, we need to...
And that is, I would say, a mistake of the city, because they should have the correct addresses on file. Especially when they have been updated and we've been getting our mail properly. It was a mistake of the city, and I believe that's why this should be reduced.
Okay. Well, I think, in light of the other individual before us, I think we need to sit down as a board here and talk about this before we make a decision on this as well here. So at this time, I think we're going to table this one as well.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Are there any other items to come forth before this board here?
I would think only scheduling your next meeting date, if it would be to, is there another Board of Adjustment date that's?
Yes,
you have?
yes.
So it would be,
I guess, I've had that property for 16 years, and this is the one notice I've ever received, just to let you know. I just don't let my lawn be unmowed.
Okay.
Just want to let you know.
thank you.
Yeah.
So our next meeting would be on the same day as our Board of Adjustments.
If that's the most convenient for the members.
I think it would be. I think we need to talk about this a little bit. I feel that there is some legitimacy to what these people are saying about it not being mailed to them. What happened there? I mean,
Well, and again, I don't want to come across as somebody who didn't get their mail. Mail does get forwarded on, and based on comments from property owners in the excitement of things, there's been responses of them actually receiving some of the mail. So again, I'm here to say what the code is, what our minimum requirements are to get those notices out. Things can happen, and people move. Having a rental property, ultimately the owner's still responsible whether you put it in that contract or not.
Right.
If they don't take care of it, actually one of the largest, can I say a name, that own property in town?
Sure.
The Fear, West
Allen
Dickinson.
and,
Yes, they have a lot of property, and when we sent them notices, initially their first response was just, how can you do this? She's actually using our letter now as, hey, this is what's gonna happen, and I'm gonna add to it if you don't fulfill your lease. She says she actually adds $100. I talked to her last week. She actually thanked me for putting that letter because because they have so many rentals, and neighbors complain a lot if a rental's not kept up. And so she actually thanked me that it's a shock. I mean, again, we don't want to do this. We send out all these notices. And again, in the time that we've done this, we've had 3 out of thousands that say they didn't get their mail. I mean, a lot of times they'll say, hey, I didn't get it. And then
Okay, I
But-
guess I mentioned that because we're a board. We were asked to sit in and listen to their complaints, and that's exactly what we did this morning. Being short of some information on this, I wasn't sure how this, whether they actually didn't receive them or whatever, but I think in the future, I'm 100% for this. I mean, if you own the piece of property, you need to maintain it, period.
Well, and
Right.
at first, we didn't start taking pictures, but we take pictures now because it just, I mean, when you're going out there where we don't own our contractor even has to rent machinery to take some of this out, because it is, we have pictures of chest high mowing. I mean, and by the time we get to it, we're trying to go out and look for these properties more now instead of being driven. Because that's what we should be, proactive and going out and making things look nicer for the city and not stop waiting for the complaints. So we are having summertime help as much as we can every summer instead of not hiring people.
Would you say that the city was partially at fault here on this because of this, or?
As far as, well, I can't, I'm not, so my clients have fault. No, but the notice, whether or not someone receives proper notice is a administrative due process type issue. I mean, so it is definitely a legitimate concern that anybody should take into consideration. How it gets taken into consideration and the impact upon your ultimate finding, unfortunately, I just have to leave to you to decide. But that is, if you don't, for example, if you get a speeding ticket but never get notice of the speeding ticket, how do you know you have a speeding ticket? So it's that due process aspect. At the same, the flip side again is the action happened, the violation occurred, and the property was abated and a cost was incurred. So those are the sort of the competing interests that you have. If you would like, between now and the next meeting, when you make your final decision, to have more information about what if you decided you wanted to reduce or eliminate the mowing charge, what would that look like? What would the result be? We can bring that information to you.
I don't know that I have I don't care if it's $1,000. What I'm getting at is, it's their property, and they're responsible for it. But if indeed they did not get the letter for some reason, I guess there's a gap in there that I would say, well, okay, am I responsible for them not receiving this letter at the proper address? I guess that's the question that I have, and I just wanted a little bit more information on this before we, since there were two of them that had the same issue. But you're saying that this happens quite often, that they'll tell
Yeah,
you.
he said 1,000 of them sent out and 3 has come back is all, that wrong address or,
Well, I'm not, some of the other ones could have, but they still received their mail.
yeah.
Is where we've gotten a call where they've yelled at us, hey, you don't even have the right address on it, even though it was forwarded to them. Is my point. I mean, they're in violation, so they definitely don't want us to feel good, so hey, you got the wrong address on here. Get it right. I mean, so obviously, we appreciate that, but
So their taxes come from the county, so that's a different database.
yes.
So that's why they're
Yes.
getting their taxes, but they're not getting.
And when a property sells, if somebody doesn't notify the Dixon, I don't believe that the county lets us know that day. I believe it's maybe quarterly, if that.
I'm not sure how often.
I don't believe it's updated instant.
So part of the, with the two properties, if I may, part of probably the notice issue and where the lines were crossed is that, for example, with the rental property, the property owner is still going to be listed as the property owner and having that name and that address. And if it's sent to the address of the property where the renters are, the renters may or may not pass that notice on to the property owner. if it's in the instance of the lot, the empty lot, if memory serves, and Mr. Schwenk can correct me, that initially the owners had a property that was owned and adjacent to the empty lot. When they moved, they sold the house, but retained ownership of the empty lot. So their names are still associated with the empty lot and connected with the address of the adjacent lot. And it wasn't, and unfortunately, yes, all the databases are not synced to the point where notifying one department necessarily translates into everybody having the most current information.
And I don't want to be mean about this, but while they lived there, the lot was maintained. And you move away, and then you don't maintain it. I mean, there's responsibility there, just like you said. You still own the lot. They're not taking care of it like when they lived there.
Okay.
I mean, there's responsibility here. There really is.
I just, like I said, I didn't know whether maybe the letter didn't get to them. You know, that's something that we don't know. And that was why I guess I allowed this to be tabled. But I want you to know that I am in agreement that there has to be something done with these properties, and as the owner, they are responsible, period.
And we're definitely we're doing things to make more public awareness that, hey, I mean, it seems like, I mean, we all here know that you need to mow your yard. I mean, if you don't take care of your property, your neighbors are gonna get upset, and generally the city gets involved.
Yeah.
I mean, it's inevitable.
Okay.
It's easy to forget, I guess, about stuff like that, but you just gotta, I think it's harder to shovel than it is to, mowing might be a little more time consuming, but I'd rather ignore shoveling than.
Okay, any other information or questions to be brought up this morning? If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn this morning.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yes, I second that.
Thank you. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.